Okay, you are looking at some of the features of Citrix GoToMeeting. It really is the same panel as GoToWebinar, so I want to use this in order to show you some of the settings that you do have control over. Now, obviously, you will be able to see what you are promoting, and you want to ask your visitors whether or not they can hear you. And if you see this and you see the audio going back and forth, you know that for the most part you are projecting. It could be that your visitors need to adjust their computer, but as long as you see this happening, you'll know then that your audio is fine. It's something that they'll need to do in order to adjust. Now, when you get ready to display your screen, what you'll want to do is you'll want to control this button. Now, if you use two screens when you do your work, you can control either screen and you can display either one to go to meeting or to your webinar attendees. And also, one of the other things that you're going to be able to do is when you have another presenter. So in other words, when you have someone that you have as a presenter, you can actually give them the keyboard and mouse by pressing this button. Okay, that'll give them access to the keyboard and mouse, and then you can always take it back because you are the webinar host. Okay, the other thing that you'll want to be aware of is this button, is that you can actually show your face on a webinar or on a GoToMeeting. So if you want to be seen by your by those that are watching the webinar. Now, warning to you that this is memory intensive if you choose to do that, but it is available to you. Okay. Now the other thing is when you start showing your screen, this button is going to show so that you know your screen is going to be seen. And incidentally, when you are presenting and you have this control panel in your screen, if you're going to present this screen, your visitors will not be able to see this screen. Right, so you won't have to worry about them seeing this panel. This panel will be invisible to them even if you're showing them this screen. It's probably one of the best things to do is if you're going to do that, you're going to want to present from the opposite screen. So you want to do this with two screens, and you want to show the opposite screen where this control panel is. Okay, now in terms of your attendees, when your attendees are asking questions or whether they're chatting, you can actually chat back to them and you can actually tell them and answer their questions by clicking on their name. Now obviously we don't have anyone's name in here. I want to look briefly at the preferences, but before I do that, one aspect of this is you'll want to be aware that your recording doesn't start automatically. You will need to start the recording, right? So if you start the recording will start. If you don't, it will not start. So you are the key to being able to get a recording of your actual presentation on GoToWebinar. Okay, GoToWebinar does integrate with Microsoft Outlook, and if that is something that you want to do, and all this really does is just control when a person can actually add this to their calendar, and that can be helpful and useful before the webinar when you're actually getting ready to send out invitations. Okay, when you discover that you do have audio problems, you'll want to go to the connection, and then you'll want to test your connection. You'll also then want to go and then test your audio, right? And you can do all that from your GoToWebinar screen. And as long as you see these things happening, you'll know that your audio is going to be fine, and that more than likely if somebody can't hear, an individual cannot hear, it's going to be their system, and they're going to need to check it in order to make sure that it's working properly. Now, when you're setting up your webinar, you'll want to be ready when you get to that point, because one of the things that you'll want to do is you'll want to make sure that you've got the right size logos. And in general, GoToWebinar logos are a particular size. This one is going to need to be 400 by 200 GIF or JPEG. The other custom image is going to be 200 by 200. So you'll need to have those images, and you can use logos, themes, or whatever the case that you want to. Now, when you add a presenter Okay, you can actually put their photo in there. Their photo is going to need to be 100 by 100. And so you want to be aware of that. Now the presenter is going to be the person you're going to have presenting in the room with you, and you're going to see their photo on the front page when someone actually comes to the webinar. So once again, that's going to be something that you're going to want to be aware of. I'm going to click save and continue so that you can see something here. Now you'll want to make sure that you have these things so that all you're asking for is first name, last name, and email. If you want to create a question for the people on your webinar, you can do that. You can have them answer it before they get on, right? Or what you can also do is you can also create poll questions, right? And you can create them from here, and you'll have access to them from GoToWebinar. Now, one of the things you can do is as soon as people register, right, or upon approval, you can have them sent to a specific URL. If you want to have them sent to look at your offer, you can have them do that. But remember, this is when they're registering. So if you don't want them to see your offer, this is probably not what you want to do. You can bring them to a page perhaps where they can get the document in order to download any notes that they're going to have during your presentation. You can have them sent there automatically. Now, once you hit this save and email button, that's going to set up your webinar. One more thing we want to kind of go back to here at the beginning during your setup is the fact that when you are setting up, you will be able to put your panelists in here. So panelists are actually not going to they're going to get a separate link in order to sign up, right? So anybody that's presenting with you, you want to put them in this panelist area. Right, you want to add them, and you want to have them have a separate email. Now they're going to be in a separate section of GoToWebinar, and I'll show you that here in a minute. Okay, when your webinar is ready, what you're going to do is you are going to then click the Start button. Now, obviously, I'm inside of Google Chrome, so there are going to be some things I'm going to have to do that, depending on what browser you're using, you're not going to have to do. Typically, there's going to be a button that'll show up here. It's not going to show up right away, so you're going to want to be aware of that. You might be looking for it when you first get started, but you're still going to have to go ahead and install that program when you see it. You're going to then just click Save to your hard drive, and then when it comes up, you're just going to click the button. It's going to go through the process of creating the panel, right? The control panel for GoToWebinar. It's going to go through all of its verifying of your ID and all of those things, but you are going to be the host, and it's going to create a panel right here for GoToWebinar. Okay, so what you'll want to do once you get this panel open, remember that one of the things you're going to have here in GoToWebinar is you're going to have a Start Broadcast button. Now, before the Start Broadcast button, the only people that are going to be able to hear each other are going to be those that are on your panel. So when you set your panel and you create that panelist list, you will be able to talk to them, and your guests will not be able to hear your conversation before the webinar. That's why it's important to set those panelists beforehand. Now, the other thing is, of course, when you get the attendee list, you're going to see the names come up when they ask a question. You're going to click on their names, and then you're going to answer their question in this box. Now, when you want to, you can actually separate out these boxes if you want to see them better. You can separate out your polls. You can actually have chats, and you can have chats specifically with certain individuals during the webinar. You can have chats with your panelists, or you can have chats specifically with with specific guests. right? Of course, now all of these things are things that you can manage in order to manage the webinar. And typically what you're going to be doing if you have a guest is you're going to be monitoring the questions, you're going to be monitoring the chat, and you can actually literally talk to everyone while this is happening. Now, the other thing that you want to be aware of is that this green mic will mute you, and you can mute your guests. So in other words, you can mute yourself, but you're also going to be able to mute your guests, not from this button, but from their own little dashboard there. Now, when you want to see what they're actually seeing, what you want to do is, now in this particular case, we haven't started the broadcast, so they're not going to see, or you're not going to be able to see what they're seeing. But when you share your screen, right, this is a bit memory intensive, so what you're going to be showing them is you are going to literally be showing them whichever screen that you designate as the one that you want to present from, right? And so as you do that, again, you just want to make sure that you understand that this control panel, right? So, okay, so now if we show this screen, we can show this screen, right? And when we show that screen, then we can literally, we have control, but we know then that they cannot see this panel. Okay, now when you start your broadcast, you're going to get a button. Actually, here's one that's audience view, so you can see what they can see. So instead of seeing this panel, right, they're going to see a blank spot because your panel is actually over this. Okay, so those are just some pointers that you want to be aware of in your GoToWebinar panel. Again, you may not be using GoToWebinar, but if so, you'll want to keep these things in mind as you run your webinar. So with that, thanks, and I will see you either in another video in this course or in another course.